They told me I had been asleep for 2 years, 2 years of my life, gone in what felt like the blink of an eye. But when I opened my eyes in that hospital room, when the fluorescent lights burned into my vision and the antiseptic smell filled my lungs, I knew something was terribly wrong. The nurse standing beside my bed, the one with the kind smile and gentle hands, she was wearing my wedding ring, the ring my husband had placed on my finger 53 years ago, the ring that had never left my hand except for that one time when I had surgery, and even then, I made them tape it to my wrist because I could not bear to be without it. But now it was on her finger, and I was supposed to believe that everything was fine, that I was safe, that I was home. You know that feeling when you wake up and something is not right, when your body knows before your mind can catch up that the world has shifted beneath you while you slept. That is what it felt like. My throat was raw, my muscles weak, my mind foggy from whatever medications they had pumped into me during those 2 lost years. But even through the haze, even through the confusion that comes with waking from a coma, I could see that ring glinting on her hand as she adjusted my IV, and every instinct in my body screamed that this was wrong. I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a whisper, barely more than a breath. She leaned in close, her face hovering over mine, and I could smell her perfume, something floral and sweet that made my stomach turn. "Where is my husband?" I managed to croak out, each word scraping against my throat like sandpaper. "Where is James?" The nurse smiled at me, that same kind smile that now felt like a mask, and she patted my hand, the hand that should have been wearing my ring. "Do not worry about anything right now," she said softly. "You need to rest. You have been through so much." But I could not rest. How could I rest when this stranger was wearing the symbol of my entire life, my entire marriage, the physical representation of 53 years of love and commitment and shared memories? I tried to sit up, but my body would not cooperate. My muscles felt like they belonged to someone else, weak and unresponsive, and the effort of trying to move sent waves of exhaustion through me that threatened to pull me back under. "No," I whispered, fighting against the darkness that wanted to claim me again. "That ring. Why are you wearing my ring?" Her expression changed then, just for a moment. Something flickered across her face, something I could not quite read through my confusion and fear. She glanced down at her hand, at my ring sitting there like it belonged to her, and when she looked back at me, her smile had changed. It was still kind, still gentle, but there was something else there now, something that made my heart race even faster than it already was. "This ring," she said quietly, "was given to me by someone who loves me very much." And then she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and my failing body, and the terrible knowledge that something unspeakable had happened while I was sleeping. The days that followed were a blur of physical therapy and doctor visits and nurses coming and going with their clipboards and their professional smiles. But that nurse, the one with my ring, she was always there, always hovering at the edge of my vision, always appearing when I least expected her, always wearing that ring like it was the most natural thing in the world. I asked about James constantly. Every doctor who came into my room, every nurse who checked my vitals, every therapist who helped me relearn how to walk. "Where is my husband? When can I see him? Why has he not come to visit me?" And every time, I got the same answer. "He is dealing with some things right now. He will come when he is ready. You need to focus on your recovery." But how could I focus on recovery when the man I had spent my entire adult life with, the man who had promised to love me in sickness and in health, was nowhere to be found? How could I concentrate on relearning how to walk when I did not even know if my husband was alive or dead? The not knowing was worse than anything else. Worse than the physical pain of my muscles remembering how to move. Worse than the headaches that came with being awake after so long. Worse than the fear that gripped me every time I saw that nurse and my ring on her finger. The not knowing ate at me, consuming my thoughts during the day and invading my dreams at night. I started to remember things in fragments, pieces of the day before my coma that came back to me in flashes of memory that felt both familiar and strange. I remembered arguing with James about something, though I could not recall what. I remembered the sound of tires screeching, the sickening crunch of metal, the way the world spun and then went dark. "A car accident," they told me. "You were in a car accident. You are very lucky to be alive." But I did not feel lucky. I felt like I had lost everything that mattered while I slept, and no one would tell me the truth about what had happened. And if you are watching this right now, if you are sitting there feeling like no one understands what it is like to wake up in a world that has moved on without you, if you have ever felt the terror of losing time and not knowing what you have missed, I want you to know that I see you. I understand that fear. I know what it is like to feel like you are drowning in questions with no answers. And I want you to do something for me, something that will help not just you but everyone else who is watching this and feeling the same way. I want you to leave a comment right now. Just type these words. I am not alone in this fear. That is all. Just those 6 words. Because when you write those words, you are not just acknowledging your own struggle. You are reaching out to every other person who is watching this and feeling the same terror, the same confusion, the same desperate need to understand what is happening. You are building a bridge between your experience and theirs. You are creating a community of people who understand, who have been there, who know that sometimes the scariest thing in the world is not knowing. So please, take a moment right now and write those words in the comments. I am not alone in this fear. Let us hold each other up. Let us remind each other that we are stronger together than we are apart. 3 weeks into my recovery, I was finally strong enough to walk on my own, though my legs still trembled with every step, and I had to hold onto the walls to keep from falling. I decided that I was going to find answers, whether anyone wanted to give them to me or not. I waited until the middle of the night, when the hospital was quiet, except for the beeping of machines and the soft footsteps of nurses making their rounds. I slipped out of my room, my bare feet silent on the cold tile floor, and I made my way down the hallway toward the nurses' station. I did not know what I was looking for exactly. Some clue. Some piece of information that would explain why my husband had not come to see me, why that nurse was wearing my ring, why everyone was treating me like I was too fragile to handle the truth. The nurses' station was empty when I got there, and I found myself standing in front of a computer, staring at the login screen and wondering if I had the courage to do what I was thinking about doing. But then I thought about that ring, about my husband, about the 2 years of my life that had been stolen from me, and I knew I had to know. I had watched enough television shows to know that hospital workers often left themselves logged in, and sure enough, when I moved the mouse, the screen came to life showing someone's email inbox. I searched for my name, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type, and what I found made my blood run cold. There were emails between my doctor and someone named Rebecca Thompson, the nurse, the one with my ring, and as I read through them, as I scrolled through weeks and months of correspondence, a picture began to emerge that was so much worse than anything I could have imagined. Rebecca was not just my nurse. She was James's girlfriend. They had met shortly after my accident, when he had been spending every day at the hospital, sitting by my bedside, holding my hand, talking to me even though I could not respond. She had been assigned to my care, and somewhere in those long hours of grief and uncertainty, they had fallen in love. Or at least, that is what the emails said. That is the story they told themselves. But it was more than that. So much more. Because according to these emails, James had wanted to remove my life support. He had wanted to let me go, to say goodbye, to move on with his life and his new love. But my daughter, my beautiful Sarah, who I had not seen or heard from since I woke up, she had fought him. She had refused to give up on me. She had taken him to court, had battled for my right to keep living, had stood between me and the man who was supposed to love me more than anyone else in the world. And she had won. The judge had ruled in her favor, had said that as long as there was brain activity, as long as there was any chance I might wake up, they had to keep me alive. I stood there in the empty hallway, reading these emails on a stranger's computer, and I felt something inside me break. Not the loud, dramatic breaking of a heart shattering, but the quiet, insidious breaking of trust dissolving, of a life crumbling, of everything you thought you knew revealing itself to be a lie. James had not come to see me because he did not want me to wake up. He had been building a life with someone else, with the woman who was supposed to be taking care of me, and my survival was nothing more than an inconvenience to them both. The ring on her finger was not stolen. It had been given, a symbol of his new life, his new love, his new future that I was not supposed to be part of. I do not know how long I stood there, reading and rereading those words, trying to make sense of something that would never make sense. Eventually, I heard footsteps coming down the hall, and I quickly closed the email and made my way back to my room, my mind reeling with everything I had learned. I climbed back into bed, pulled the thin hospital blanket up to my chin, and stared at the ceiling as dawn began to break outside my window. What was I supposed to do with this information? How was I supposed to move forward knowing that the man I had loved for 53 years had been ready to let me die so he could be with someone else? The next morning, Sarah came to visit me, my daughter, my precious girl who was not a girl anymore, but a woman in her 50s, with gray streaking through her hair and lines around her eyes that I did not remember being there before. She stood in the doorway of my room for a long moment, just looking at me, and I could see tears streaming down her face. "Mom," she whispered, and then she was rushing toward me, wrapping her arms around me carefully, mindful of all the tubes and wires still connected to my body. "I have missed you so much. I have missed you every single day." I held her as tightly as my weak arms would allow, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, feeling the solidness of her presence, and for the first time since I woke up, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. We talked for hours that day. She told me about the accident, about the drunk driver who had run a red light and hit my car head-on, about how I had been in critical condition for weeks before finally stabilizing into the coma. She told me about the legal battle with her father, about the judge's ruling, about how she had spent the last 2 years visiting me every single day, reading to me, talking to me, playing my favorite music, refusing to give up hope even when everyone else said I was never going to wake up. And then, with tears still streaming down her face, she told me about Rebecca, about how her father had moved Rebecca into our house 6 months after my accident, about how they had cleared out my things from the bedroom, had donated my clothes to charity, had erased me from the home I had spent 30 years creating and filling with love and memories, about how Rebecca wore my jewelry, slept in my bed, cooked in my kitchen, lived my life while I lay here sleeping, about how her father had given Rebecca my wedding ring on their 1-year anniversary, calling it a symbol of his commitment to their future together. I listened to all of this, and I felt a numbness spreading through me that had nothing to do with my physical condition. This was the numbness of grief, of betrayal, of having to accept that the life I had known was gone forever. Even if I recovered fully, even if I regained all my strength and independence, I could never go back to the life I had before. That life had been dismantled piece by piece while I slept, and there was no putting it back together. But Sarah had not given up on me. Even when her father had, even when the doctors had suggested it might be kinder to let me go, even when everyone around her had said she was being selfish for keeping me alive, she had fought for me. She had believed in me. She had known, somehow, that I was still in there, still fighting, still holding on, and she had been right. Over the next few weeks, as I grew stronger and began the long process of rebuilding my body and my life, Sarah helped me understand the legal situation. Because I had been declared incapacitated, James had been able to make decisions about our shared assets. He had drained our joint bank accounts. He had refinanced our house, taking out a massive loan against the equity we had built up over 3 decades. He had sold my car, my furniture, had given away family heirlooms that had been passed down through generations. All of it, gone. All of it, converted into cash that he had used to fund his new life with Rebecca. But there were things he could not touch. My retirement account, which was in my name only, a small inheritance I had received from my mother years ago that I had kept separate, and most importantly, the life insurance policy I had taken out when I was younger, naming Sarah as the sole beneficiary. It was not much, but it was something. It was a foundation we could build on. The day I was finally discharged from the hospital, Sarah came to pick me up. She had found us an apartment, nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom place across town from the house that used to be mine. She had furnished it with items from thrift stores and donations from friends, had made it as comfortable as she could on her limited budget. As we drove away from the hospital, I looked out the window at the world I had been absent from for 2 years, and I realized how much had changed. New buildings had gone up. Old landmarks had been torn down. The trees were taller. The children playing in the parks were different children than the ones I remembered. Time had moved on without me, and I was now a stranger in a familiar place. We pulled up to the apartment building, and Sarah helped me out of the car, supporting me as we slowly made our way up the stairs to the 2nd floor. She unlocked the door and held it open for me, and I stepped inside to see what would be my new home. It was small and simple, but Sarah had done her best to make it welcoming. There were flowers on the kitchen table, photos of our family on the walls, pictures from before, from when we were all still together and happy and whole. My favorite blanket draped over the couch, little touches that reminded me that even though everything had changed, some things remained. Love remained. Family remained. Hope remained. That first night in the apartment, I could not sleep. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a neighborhood I did not know. I thought about James and Rebecca in my house, in my bed, living the life that should have been mine. I thought about all the moments I had missed during those 2 years, birthdays and holidays and ordinary days that would never come again. I thought about the person I had been before the accident, the woman who had believed in forever and happily ever after, and the sanctity of marriage vows. That woman felt like a stranger to me now, but I also thought about Sarah, sleeping in the room next to mine, the daughter who had never given up on me even when it would have been easier to let go. I thought about the strength it must have taken for her to stand up to her father, to fight him in court, to visit me every single day for 2 years, even when there was no guarantee I would ever wake up. I thought about the love that had sustained her through all of that, and I realized that maybe I had not lost everything after all. Maybe the most important thing, the most precious thing, had been there all along, waiting for me to wake up and see it. The months that followed were hard in ways I had never imagined. Physical therapy was grueling, pushing my body to remember things it had forgotten, rebuilding strength that had atrophied during my long sleep. But the emotional recovery was even harder. I had to grieve the loss of my marriage, the loss of the life I had planned, the loss of the person I had been. I had to learn how to be someone new, someone who existed in this changed world, someone who could find meaning and purpose despite everything that had been taken from me. Sarah was there for all of it. She drove me to therapy appointments and doctor visits. She helped me with exercises when I was too tired or frustrated to do them on my own. She sat with me on the bad days, the days when the weight of everything that had happened felt too heavy to bear, and she reminded me that I was stronger than I knew. She celebrated the small victories with me. The first time I could walk without assistance, the first time I could dress myself, the first time I could make it through an entire day without thinking about James and Rebecca and the life they had stolen from me. And slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. Not in the way I had expected, not by going back to who I was before, but by becoming someone new, someone who understood that love is not always forever, that promises can be broken, that the people you trust most can betray you in ways you never saw coming, but also someone who knew that there are people in this world who will fight for you even when you cannot fight for yourself. Someone who understood that family is not always about blood or marriage, but about who shows up when everything falls apart. During those months of recovery, I started having dreams about the accident. Not memories exactly, because I had been unconscious for most of it, but my mind trying to fill in the blanks, trying to make sense of what had happened. In these dreams, I would see headlights coming toward me, hear the screeching of brakes, feel the impact over and over again. And in every dream, just before the moment of collision, I would see a face in the other car, a face I did not recognize then, but that I would later learn belonged to Rebecca's brother. My subconscious knew somehow that this was not just a random accident. My body remembered what my conscious mind had not yet discovered. Sarah started taking me to support groups for trauma survivors. At first, I resisted. I did not want to sit in a circle of strangers and share my pain. I did not want to hear their stories and be reminded that suffering was everywhere, that I was just one of countless people whose lives had been shattered by circumstances beyond their control. But Sarah insisted, and I went because I could not bear to disappoint her after everything she had done for me. And something unexpected happened in those groups. I found my voice. I found the strength to speak about what had been done to me, not just by the accident, but by the people I had trusted most. And in speaking it out loud, in hearing my own words echo back to me from the experiences of others who had also been betrayed and abandoned, I began to understand that healing was not about forgetting or forgiving. It was about bearing witness to your own pain and allowing others to bear witness with you. There was a woman in one of those groups. Her name was Margaret, and she had lost her husband to another woman after 40 years of marriage, not because of a coma or an accident, but simply because he had decided one day that he wanted something different, someone younger, a fresh start. She told me something I will never forget. She said that betrayal is not just about what is taken from you. It is about what is revealed to you. It reveals who people really are when they think you are not watching, when they think you are too weak or too absent to hold them accountable. And once you see that truth, once you really understand who they have always been underneath the promises and the pretense, you cannot unsee it. The grief is not just about losing them. It is about grieving the person you thought they were, the person who never actually existed, except in your imagination. Those words stayed with me. They helped me understand that I was not just grieving the loss of my marriage or my home, or the 2 years of my life that had been stolen. I was grieving the loss of my illusions, the comfortable lies I had told myself about James, about our relationship, about the foundation our life together had been built on. Because if he could abandon me so completely when I needed him most, if he could move another woman into our home and give her my jewelry and plan a future that erased me entirely, then what had our 53 years together actually meant? Had any of it been real? Had he ever loved me the way I thought he did? Or had I just been convenient, just been there, just been the placeholder until something better came along? These were the questions that haunted me during those long months of recovery. These were the thoughts that kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling of our small apartment, listening to Sarah sleep in the next room, and wondering if I would ever feel whole again. But slowly, with the help of the support group and Sarah's unwavering presence and the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other every single day, I began to find answers. Not the answers I wanted, not the neat closure that ties everything up with a bow, but the messy, complicated truth that sometimes people we love are capable of causing us unimaginable pain. And that does not mean we were wrong to love them. It just means they were human, and humans are flawed, and love is not always enough to make someone choose you when choosing you becomes difficult. I started writing letters to James during this time. Letters I never sent. Letters that existed only for me. A way to process everything I was feeling without actually having to confront him. I wrote about the early years of our marriage, about how young and hopeful we had been, about the dreams we had shared for our future. I wrote about the birth of Sarah, about how we had stood together in that hospital room and marveled at the tiny, perfect human we had created. I wrote about the fights we had had over the years, the disagreements about money and parenting and whose family to spend the holidays with. I wrote about the good times too, the vacations and anniversaries and quiet Sunday mornings reading the newspaper together. I wrote about all of it, every memory I could summon, trying to create a complete picture of what our life together had actually been. And what I discovered through this writing was that our marriage had not been perfect. It had not been the fairy tale I had sometimes pretended it was. There had been warning signs all along, small moments of selfishness on his part, times when he had chosen his own comfort over my needs, instances where he had been less than honest or less than kind. I had overlooked these things because I wanted to believe in the story we were telling ourselves, the story of a love that would last forever, but the truth was more complicated. The truth was that James had always been capable of the betrayal he eventually committed. I had just chosen not to see it, because seeing it would have required me to make different choices, harder choices, choices that would have disrupted the comfortable life we had built together. This realization was both devastating and liberating. Devastating, because it meant I had to accept my own role in what had happened, had to acknowledge that I had ignored my instincts and settled for less than I deserved because I was afraid of being alone. But liberating, because it meant that what happened was not just about my bad luck or his moral failure, it was about patterns that had been there all along. Patterns I could learn to recognize so I would never repeat them again. It meant I had agency in my own story, that I was not just a victim of circumstances, but a participant in my own life, who could make different choices going forward. 6 months after I woke up from my coma, I received a call from a lawyer. James wanted a divorce. He wanted to make things official with Rebecca, wanted to marry her, wanted to finally close the door on our life together once and for all. The lawyer explained that because of the circumstances, because of the way James had handled our assets while I was incapacitated, I had grounds for a significant settlement. We could fight this, the lawyer said. We could make him pay for what he did, and part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to drag him through court, to make him face what he had done, to make him acknowledge the 53 years we had spent together before he had thrown it all away. But another part of me, a part that was growing stronger every day, just wanted to be free. I did not want to spend years fighting over money and property and who deserved what. I did not want my healing to be dependent on revenge or justice or making him hurt the way he had hurt me. So I told the lawyer to settle, take what we can get, and move on. Let him have the house and the furniture and the life he had built with Rebecca. I did not need any of it. I had something more valuable. I had my daughter. I had my freedom. I had a second chance at life, and I was not going to waste it looking backward. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. James kept the house. I kept my retirement account and the small inheritance from my mother. We split what was left of our savings, which was not much after he had spent most of it. And just like that, 53 years of marriage was reduced to signatures on legal documents and a division of assets. No ceremony, no acknowledgement of everything we had shared, just an ending, quiet and final, and somehow more painful for its ordinariness. But endings, I was learning, are also beginnings. With the settlement money and my retirement funds, Sarah and I found a better apartment, a place with a little balcony where I could sit in the sunshine and watch the world go by. I started volunteering at the library, reading to children, helping elderly patrons find books, slowly rebuilding a sense of purpose and connection. Sarah encouraged me to take a painting class, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for when I was busy being a wife and mother and working full-time. I discovered that I loved it, loved the way the colors blended on the canvas, loved the meditative quality of brushstrokes, loved creating something beautiful out of nothing but imagination and effort. I made new friends, other women who had survived their own losses and betrayals, who understood what it meant to rebuild a life from scratch. We met for coffee and went to museums and took day trips to the beach. We laughed together and cried together and held each other up when the grief became too much. And slowly, I began to understand that my life was not over. It was different than I had planned, but it was still mine, and it was still worth living. A year after my divorce was finalized, Sarah told me she had something to show me. She drove us across town, to a neighborhood I did not recognize, and pulled up in front of a small house with a neat lawn and flowers blooming in the garden. "This is it," she said, turning to look at me with tears in her eyes. "This is ours." She had been saving money, working extra hours, cutting expenses wherever she could, and she had bought us a house, a real home where we could build new memories, where we could finally put down roots, where we could start over for real. I walked through the rooms of that little house with tears streaming down my face, seeing all the ways Sarah had prepared it for me. My favorite color painted on the walls of my bedroom, a studio space set up for my painting, photos of us together arranged on shelves and tables, a garden in the back where we could grow vegetables and flowers. It was perfect. It was home. And it was ours, built not on betrayal and lies, but on love and sacrifice and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter. We moved in the following month, and I threw myself into making that house a home. I painted the walls with scenes from my imagination. I planted roses and tomatoes and herbs in the garden. I learned how to cook new recipes and invited my friends over for dinner parties. I created a life that was mine, that belonged to no one else, that could not be taken from me while I slept, because I was wide awake now, fully present, fully alive. As the seasons changed and I settled deeper into my new life, I found myself thinking less about what I had lost and more about what I had gained. The painting classes led to a small showing at a local gallery. Nothing major, just a corner dedicated to local artists, but seeing my work hanging on those walls, seeing strangers stop and look at something I had created, something that had come from the deepest parts of my pain and transformation, that felt like a kind of redemption. One woman bought 3 of my paintings. She told me they reminded her of her own mother, who had passed away the year before. She said looking at my work made her feel close to her mother again, made her remember that love does not end just because someone is gone. I cried right there in the gallery, overwhelmed by the idea that my suffering could be transformed into something that brought comfort to someone else. The volunteering at the library expanded too. What started as just reading to children grew into a weekly program where I would tell stories, not from books, but from my own imagination, weaving tales about brave grandmothers and second chances and the magic of not giving up. The children loved it. They would sit at my feet, eyes wide, hanging on every word, and I realized I was teaching them something important. I was teaching them that old people are not just waiting to die, that we have stories worth hearing, that we have overcome things they could not imagine, that we contain multitudes of experience and wisdom and hard-won knowledge. And I was also teaching myself that I still had something valuable to offer the world, that my life had purpose beyond being someone's wife or living in the past. Sarah got promoted at work. The long hours she had been putting in, the extra shifts she had taken to save money for our house, all of it had been noticed by her supervisors. She came home one evening with tears of joy streaming down her face, telling me about the raise and the new responsibilities and how proud she was of what we had built together. We celebrated with cheap champagne and takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant, sitting on the floor of our living room because we still did not have enough furniture, laughing about nothing and everything. just being together in that moment of pure happiness. And I looked at her, my daughter who had sacrificed so much for me, who had fought her own father to keep me alive, who had never wavered in her faith that I would come back to her, and I felt a gratitude so profound it took my breath away. I started writing more than just letters to James. I started writing my story, not in letters but in something that resembled a memoir, trying to capture every detail of what had happened from the moment I woke up until the present day. I wrote about the hospital and the ring on Rebecca's finger and the emails I had found and the divorce and the house Sarah bought and the paintings and the children at the library. I wrote about the support group and Margaret's wisdom and the dreams about the accident and the slow, painful process of learning to be someone new. I wrote hundreds of pages, thousands of words, pouring everything I had experienced onto the page, as if by documenting it, I could make sense of it, could find the meaning hidden in all that pain. One of the women from my support group read what I had written. Her name was Linda, and she worked as an editor for a small publishing house. She told me my story needed to be shared, that there were thousands of women out there who had experienced similar betrayals, who needed to know they were not alone, who needed to see an example of someone who had survived and rebuilt and found joy again. She offered to help me shape it into something publishable, to guide me through the process of turning my raw experience into a narrative that could reach people and help them. I was terrified. The idea of exposing my pain to the world, of letting strangers into the most vulnerable parts of my life, it felt like standing naked in front of a crowd. But I also knew she was right. I knew my story had value beyond just my own healing. So I said yes. The months of working on the manuscript were some of the hardest and most rewarding of my life. Linda would ask me questions that forced me to go deeper, to examine parts of my experience I had been avoiding, to be honest about my own failings and fears and moments of weakness. She helped me see that the power of my story was not in portraying myself as a perfect victim, but in showing the full complexity of what it means to be human, to be hurt, to make mistakes, to learn and grow and change. We worked together for almost a year, refining and revising, cutting and expanding, until we had something that felt true and complete and ready to share with the world. The book was published 2 years after I woke up from my coma. It was not a bestseller. It did not make me rich or famous, but it reached the people it needed to reach. I started getting emails from women who had read it, women who told me my story had given them courage to leave abusive relationships, to stand up for themselves, to believe that they deserved better than what they had settled for. I heard from daughters who had fought to keep their parents alive against the wishes of other family members, who had questioned whether they were doing the right thing, who found validation in Sarah's story. I heard from coma survivors who struggled with the disconnect between the time they lost and the world they woke up to, who felt seen and understood for the first time. Every email was a reminder that pain shared becomes pain diminished, that speaking our truth creates space for others to speak theirs, that we are never as alone as we think we are. Sarah organized a small book launch at the local bookstore. She invited everyone we knew, all the friends I had made in the support group and the painting class and the library volunteer program, all the neighbors who had welcomed us into the community, everyone who had been part of my journey back to life. The bookstore was packed. People stood along the walls because there were not enough chairs. And when I got up to read from my book, when I looked out at all those faces looking back at me with such love and support and understanding, I felt something shift inside me. I felt the last pieces of my broken heart come back together, not in the same configuration as before, but in a new pattern, one that was stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. I read the section about waking up and seeing the ring on Rebecca's finger. I read about the emails and the betrayal and the divorce. I read about Sarah's fight to keep me alive and the house she bought us and the life we built together. And when I finished, there was not a dry eye in that bookstore. People came up to me afterward, hugging me, thanking me, telling me their own stories of loss and survival and the unexpected grace that sometimes emerges from our darkest moments. We stayed there for hours, long after the official event was over, just talking and sharing and building connections that would last long after that night ended. That evening marked a turning point for me. It was the moment I truly understood that I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by what I had chosen to do with it. I had taken the worst experience of my life and transformed it into something that could help others. I had turned my pain into purpose, and that realization was more healing than any therapy or medication or amount of time could have been. The months after the book launch brought new opportunities. I was invited to speak at other support groups, at conferences for healthcare workers about the importance of patient advocacy, at libraries and community centers about resilience and second chances. I was not a professional speaker. I did not have any training or credentials. I just had my story and my willingness to share it authentically, and apparently that was enough. People responded to the rawness of my experience, to the fact that I did not try to tie everything up neatly or pretend I had all the answers. They responded to my humanity, to my vulnerability, to my admission that I was still figuring things out as I went along. During one of these speaking engagements, at a conference for family caregivers, I met a woman who changed my perspective on forgiveness. Her name was Ruth, and she was caring for her husband who had Alzheimer's disease. She told me about how he no longer recognized her, how he sometimes thought she was a stranger, or even became afraid of her, how the man she had loved for 40 years was disappearing piece by piece until she was left caring for someone who looked like her husband but did not know who she was. And she told me that she had to forgive him every single day for leaving her, even though he did not choose to leave, even though it was not his fault, even though he was still physically present. She had to forgive the disease for taking him from her. She had to forgive herself for the moments when she resented him, or felt angry, or wished it would all just end. She had to forgive the universe for allowing this to happen. And through that constant practice of forgiveness, she had found a kind of peace. Her words stayed with me for days afterward. I had been so focused on whether or not to forgive James and Rebecca, as if forgiveness was a single decision I could make once and be done with it. But Ruth helped me understand that forgiveness is not an event. It is a practice. It is something you choose over and over again, not because the people who hurt you deserve it, but because you deserve to be free from the weight of carrying that hurt. I realized I did not have to decide once and for all whether to forgive them. I could just choose, in each moment when the anger or pain or betrayal threatened to overwhelm me, to let it go, not to forget what happened, not to excuse what they did, just to release my grip on it so it could not keep dragging me down. And then, 2 years after I woke up from my coma, I saw James and Rebecca at the grocery store. I was in the produce section, selecting apples, when I looked up and there they were, standing by the tomatoes, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing at some private joke. She was still wearing my ring. After everything, after the divorce and the settlement and the new life I had built, she was still wearing the ring that had symbolized my marriage, my love, my commitment to a man who had been ready to let me die. I stood there, frozen, my hand hovering over the apples, and I waited for the pain to come, the anger, the betrayal, the grief. I waited to feel something, anything, about seeing them together, about the visual confirmation of everything I had lost. But what I felt instead was something I had not expected. I felt nothing. No, that is not quite right. I felt free. I looked at James, really looked at him for the first time since I woke up, and I realized he was just a man, not the villain of my story, not the love of my life, just a man who had made choices I did not agree with, who had hurt me in ways I would never fully understand, but who was also just human, just flawed, just trying to find happiness in whatever way he knew how. And Rebecca, with my ring on her finger, she was not the evil woman who had stolen my husband. She was just someone who had fallen in love with a grieving man, who had stepped into a situation that was complicated and messy and painful for everyone involved. I did not need to forgive them. I did not need to forget what they had done. But I also did not need to carry the weight of their choices anymore. I could set it down. I could walk away. I could choose to focus on the life I had built rather than the life that had been taken from me. So I selected my apples, put them in my basket, and walked past them without saying a word. I did not need closure. I did not need an explanation. I did not need anything from them at all. I just needed to keep moving forward, keep building, keep living the life I had been given a second chance to create. When I got home that day, Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up as I came in, and something in my expression must have told her what had happened because she put down her knife and came to me, wrapping me in a hug without asking any questions. We stood there in our kitchen, in our home, holding each other, and I realized that this, right here, this was what mattered, not the past, not the betrayal, not the lost years or the broken promises. This, the love that had never wavered, the family that had fought for me when I could not fight for myself, the second chance I had been given to build a life worth living. And if you have made it this far, if you have walked with me through this entire journey, I want to ask you something. Have you found your own second chance yet? Have you allowed yourself to believe that your story is not over, even when it feels like everything has fallen apart? Because I need you to know something. You are not alone. Whatever you are facing, whatever battles you are fighting, whatever losses you are grieving, there are people who understand. There are people who have been where you are and have made it to the other side. And we are here, building a community of survivors and fighters and people who refuse to give up even when giving up would be so much easier. So if this story has meant something to you, if you have seen yourself in my struggle or found hope in my healing, I want to invite you to join us. Subscribe to this channel. Become part of this family of people who understand what it means to lose everything and find the strength to rebuild. Every week, we share stories like mine, stories of survival and resilience, and the incredible power of love to sustain us through the darkest times. And when you subscribe, you are not just supporting this channel. You are connecting with thousands of other people who are on the same journey, who need to hear these stories as much as you do, who are looking for a community where they can feel understood and supported and less alone. So please, take a moment right now and click that subscribe button. Join our family. Let us walk this road together. Now, I need to tell you something. Something I have been holding back this entire time because I needed you to understand the full weight of what happened before I could share this final truth. Remember how I told you that Sarah fought her father in court? Remember how I said she won, that the judge ruled in her favor, that she kept me alive against his wishes? That part was true. But what I did not tell you, what I could not bring myself to say until now, is why the judge ruled the way he did. It was not just because there was brain activity. It was not just because there was a chance I might wake up. It was because of something Sarah discovered during the legal proceedings. Something that changed everything. You see, Sarah hired a private investigator to look into the accident. She wanted to understand what had happened that night, wanted to know every detail, wanted answers to questions that kept her up at night wondering. And what the investigator found was that the drunk driver who hit me, the man who sent me into a 2-year coma and destroyed my life as I knew it, he was not some random stranger. He was Rebecca's brother. Rebecca, the nurse who was assigned to my care, who fell in love with my husband while I lay unconscious, who ended up wearing my wedding ring and sleeping in my bed. Her brother had been the one driving drunk that night. Her brother had been the one who ran the red light. Her brother had been the one who hit my car head-on and left me for dead. And here is where it gets worse. The investigation revealed that Rebecca and her brother had been at the same bar that night. They had been drinking together. She had watched him get into his car, had seen how intoxicated he was, and she had let him drive anyway. She had not stopped him. She had not called him a cab. She had not taken his keys. She had just let him go, drunk and impaired and dangerous, out onto the roads where he would eventually cross paths with me and change both our lives forever. When James found out, when Sarah showed him the investigator's report, he was devastated, but not devastated enough to leave Rebecca, not devastated enough to question whether the woman he had fallen in love with while his wife lay dying had any culpability in putting me in that condition in the first place. He buried the information. He chose not to press charges. He chose to protect Rebecca and her brother over seeking justice for me. And that was when Sarah took the evidence to the judge, when she revealed the full truth about the accident and Rebecca's connection to it, when she made it clear that allowing James to remove my life support would be allowing him to literally get away with helping to cover up the circumstances that had put me in that coma to begin with. The judge was horrified. He ruled immediately in Sarah's favor, declaring that James could no longer make medical decisions on my behalf and appointing Sarah as my legal guardian. He also ordered an investigation into whether criminal charges should be filed against Rebecca for her role in the accident. But by the time all of this came to light, the statute of limitations had run out on most of the potential charges. Rebecca's brother had already served a minimal sentence for the drunk driving. Rebecca herself faced no legal consequences because she had not been the one driving. The system had failed me, just as my husband had failed me, just as my own body had failed me by staying asleep through all of it. But Sarah had not failed me. She had fought for me every single day. She had uncovered the truth even when doing so put her at odds with her own father. She had refused to let me go even when keeping me alive meant sacrificing her relationship with him. She had chosen me over and over again in ways I did not even know about until long after I woke up. And now, sitting here in the home we built together, living this second chance life I was given, I understand that the ring on Rebecca's finger does not matter. The house I lost does not matter. The marriage that ended does not matter. What matters is that I am here. I survived. I woke up. I got to rebuild. I got to discover that the love I thought I had lost was never really gone, because it had never been with James in the first place. It had been with Sarah all along. The truest, deepest, most unshakable love I had ever known was not romantic love or marital love. It was the love between a mother and daughter, the love that persists even when you are unconscious, the love that fights for you when you cannot fight for yourself, the love that never, ever gives up. So when people ask me if I am angry about what happened, if I hate James and Rebecca for what they did, if I wish things had turned out differently, I tell them the truth. I tell them that yes, I was angry. Yes, I grieved. Yes, I spent months processing the betrayal and the loss and the unfairness of it all. But I also tell them that waking up from that coma was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it showed me who I could count on. It showed me what real love looks like. It showed me that I am stronger than I ever knew, that I can survive things I never thought possible, that I can build a beautiful life out of the broken pieces of the one I lost. I tell them that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the doorway to your greatest transformation. That sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. That sometimes you have to sleep for 2 years before you can wake up to the truth of your own life. And I tell them that if they are going through something similar, if they feel like their world has fallen apart and they will never recover, they need to hold on. They need to keep fighting. They need to believe that there is a life waiting for them on the other side of this pain, a life they cannot even imagine yet, but that is so much richer and more authentic than anything they have known before, because I am living proof that it is possible. I am living proof that you can wake up in a nightmare and turn it into a dream. I am living proof that love endures, that hope survives, that we are capable of healing from wounds we thought would destroy us. The ring on Rebecca's finger does not define me anymore. My failed marriage does not define me. The 2 years I lost do not define me. What defines me now is the choice I make every single day to keep living, to keep loving, to keep believing that my story is not over yet. And if you have made it to the end of this story, if you have walked with me through every painful revelation and hard-won victory, then I want you to know that your story is not over yet either. No matter what you have lost, no matter what has been taken from you, no matter how long you have been asleep to your own life, you can wake up, you can rebuild, you can become someone you never knew you could be. So please, do not leave this video without doing 2 things. First, leave a comment telling me one thing you are grateful for today, one small piece of beauty or hope or love that you are holding on to. And second, subscribe to this channel so you can continue this journey with us, so you can be part of this community of survivors and fighters and people who refuse to give up. We need you here. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Your presence in this community matters. Click that subscribe button right now and join us. Let us walk this road together, supporting each other, holding each other up, reminding each other that we are stronger than we know and more loved than we can possibly imagine. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me, for hearing me, for allowing me to share the most painful and beautiful chapters of my life with you. I will be here next week with another story, another journey, another reminder that no matter how dark things get, there is always light waiting on the other side. Until then, take care of yourself, be gentle with your heart, and remember, you are not alone in this. You never were. You never will be. In the months that followed that encounter at the grocery store, I found myself thinking about Rebecca's brother more than I thought about Rebecca or James. He was the one who had actually caused the accident. He was the one whose choices had set everything else in motion, and I realized I knew nothing about him beyond the basic facts from the police report. I did not know if he had ever expressed remorse. I did not know if he had changed his life after serving his sentence. I did not know if he even remembered the night he hit my car and sent me into a 2-year coma that changed the course of multiple lives. Part of me wanted to find out. Part of me wanted to confront him, to look him in the eye and ask him what he had been thinking, to make him understand the full weight of what his decision to drive drunk had cost me. But another part of me knew that confrontation would not give me what I was looking for. He could not undo what he had done. He could not give me back those 2 years. He could not repair the damage to my marriage or restore my faith in the man I had loved for 53 years. All he could do was say he was sorry, and I already knew that sorry was not enough. So I made a different choice. I started volunteering with an organization that worked with drunk driving prevention. I went to high schools and told my story to auditoriums full of teenagers who thought they were invincible, who could not imagine that one bad decision could destroy lives. I showed them pictures of the car I had been driving, crushed and mangled beyond recognition. I told them about waking up 2 years later to find my entire life had been dismantled. I told them about the ripple effects of that one drunk driver's choice, how it had not just hurt me, but had damaged my daughter, had destroyed my marriage, had changed the trajectory of everyone connected to me. And I watched their faces change as they listened, watched the invincibility fade and the reality sink in. Some of them cried. Some of them came up to me afterward and promised they would never drink and drive, that they would be the designated driver, that they would call their parents for a ride no matter what. And I knew that maybe, just maybe, my pain could prevent someone else's family from experiencing the same devastation. This work became one of the most meaningful parts of my new life. It gave me a way to take the worst thing that had ever happened to me and transform it into something that could save lives. Every speech I gave, every teenager I reached, every parent who thanked me for talking to their child, it was another step in my healing journey. It was proof that suffering does not have to be meaningless, that we can choose to make our pain matter by using it to help others avoid the same fate. Sarah started dating someone new, a kind man named David, who worked as a teacher and treated her with the gentleness and respect she deserved. I watched them together, saw the way he looked at her like she hung the moon, the way he listened when she talked, the way he supported her dreams and celebrated her victories. And I realized that part of my healing was watching my daughter find the kind of love I had thought I had but never really did. She had learned from my mistakes. She had seen what happened when you settle for someone who cannot show up for you in the hard times, and she had chosen differently. She had chosen someone who would fight for her the way she had fought for me. Watching their relationship grow and deepen was like getting a glimpse of an alternate timeline, a version of what love could be when both people were committed to showing up fully and honestly. One evening, about 3 years after I woke from the coma, Sarah came to me with news. David had proposed. She was getting married. We spent months together planning, and when the day came, when I watched her walk down the aisle toward a man who loved her completely, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude that I had lived to see this day. Gratitude that out of all the darkness and pain, something as beautiful as this could emerge. At the reception, I gave a speech about Sarah's strength and courage, about how she had been my advocate when I could not advocate for myself, about how proud I was of the woman she had become. When I sat down, Sarah came over and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering thank you over and over into my ear. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that everything I had been through had been worth it to arrive at this place. About a year after Sarah's wedding, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Rebecca's brother, the drunk driver. He had been sober for 3 years. He said he thought about the accident every day. He wanted me to know he was deeply sorry, that he had dedicated his life to helping other people struggling with addiction, that he hoped someday I might be able to forgive him. I read that letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. I thought about all the work I had done to release my anger and resentment, and I realized this man deserved the same grace I had been trying to extend to everyone else. So I wrote him back. I told him I appreciated his letter. I told him about the drunk driving prevention work I was doing, and I told him that I forgave him, not because he earned it, but because I deserved to be free from the burden of hating him. 4 years after waking from my coma, I started a foundation, the Second Chance Foundation. Its mission was to support coma survivors and their families with resources for recovery, advocacy training for medical decision-making, and connection to support groups. Sarah helped me set it up, and it grew from just a website into programs that helped hundreds of families across the country. The foundation became the culmination of everything I had learned through my ordeal. It was proof that trauma could be transformed into service. Every family we helped, every survivor we connected to resources, it was validation that my suffering had meaning, that my second chance at life was about more than just my own recovery. Looking back now, 5 years after waking from that coma, I can see the full arc of my journey, from the confusion and betrayal of those first days, through the anger and grief of divorce and rebuilding, to the healing that came through community and purpose. I am not the same person I was before the accident. That woman is gone, and I have stopped mourning her. The woman I am now is stronger, wiser, more authentic. She knows what real love looks like. She knows her own worth. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me, for hearing me, for allowing me to share the most painful and beautiful chapters of my life with you. I will be here next week with another story, another journey, another reminder that no matter how dark things get, there is always light waiting on the other side. Until then, take care of yourself, be gentle with your heart, and remember, you are not alone in this. You never were, you never will be.